quarterback battles all across the country, spring practice, the curtain's kind of going up on spring. So we got to talk about some of these quarterback battles. Some of these are going to rage on, in fact, I would argue most of them will probably rage on well past spring. But boy, we're about to learn a lot, because keep in mind, this is the backdrop. With all these quarterback battles, especially every position battle, but especially quarterback battles, you always have to keep in mind now, in the transfer portal era, if any of these guys gets the slightest whiff that they're definitely not starting here this fall, the portal's right there, they could be in it. You're sound asleep, 3 a.m. as a coach, and all of a sudden you hear a noise. Your quarterback's gone. You wake up the next morning, quarterback's gone. So keep that in mind, because some of these places, like the first one we're going to talk about here, LSU, it's not one or two names. It's like 3 or 4 names we're talking about, although there's a pretty good reason to believe there's a red shirt coming for at least one. So let's start with LSU. And let's take a look, you and I, at some of these quarterback situations, because it appears that the consensus for a couple of these places is not one that I agree with, at least as it stands right now. So at LSU, the big news Sunday night was Jayden Daniels is freshly in the door now. He came to Baton Rouge by way of Arizona State. And a lot of folks think he's going to take that job. And I was talking to Colin out there in whatever we would call it, the office, I guess. I was talking to Colin out there in the office, got basketball on, 14 different monitors. It makes you feel a lot more wealthy than you are, really, if you sit around our office. But I told him, hey, is it just me or does everyone think Jayden Daniels is going to come in and win this job? And he said, yes, kind of what I'm seeing. I don't feel that way, just snap of the finger, foregone conclusion style. I'm not saying he's not going to win the job, but man, like I'm looking around, Miles Brennan has been around the block a time or 10 down there. He's there. Garrett Nussmeier is no longer a true freshman. And both of those guys have tools. Both of them have adequate skill. And keep in mind, Jayden Daniels isn't some parade All-American coming in here. It's not a guy who had Arizona State on the fringes of any kind of postseason of note. Yeah, I mean, the guy has tools, but so do the other two. For that matter, Walker Howard's got tools. That's the one I think will redshirt, obviously, true freshman there. But, man, I'm very interested to see, because this feels to me like one of those things where a hot name just came in and everyone gets excited about it. I think there's so much that needs to play out there. So when we start spring down in Baton Rouge, let's see how those reps are divvied up. A lot of times you learn a lot about practice and where you stand in the quarterback race by how reps are divvied up. Let's see if Jayden Daniels is the one, because ultimately the coaching staff just wants someone to take the job. That's what they want, and we'll see. At Clemson, boy, this one's really fascinating. This one got mentioned to me more than anyone. I think this is probably the most intriguing national quarterback situation, only because of where we were last year. This time last year, you got Clemson as the preemptive favorite, obviously to win the ACC and to make the playoff. And why is that? Well, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is gone, but DJ Uiagalelei's there. And here's the added benefit. He's not a true freshman either. He got to be here 1 year and he got to learn, so certainly he'll be even more equipped and acclimated, and he just wasn't. He wasn't ready. He wasn't a great quarterback by any stretch of the imagination last year. Well, why does that entertain us now? It entertains us, at least a thought in your mind that things could change at Clemson, because you got Cade Klubnik coming in there. That's 5-star quarterback, true freshman. Pretty much everyone early enrolls now. And so Dabo Swinney has not been bashful about this. Dabo's talked about the spring and how pivotal it's going to be and how, yeah, of course there's going to be open competition at quarterback. But I don't think it's just coach speak. I think he's going well beyond that, and he's adequately assessing the situation there, and it's not acceptable. Like, the level of quarterback play was not acceptable for the standard that Clemson football has set for themselves. And you got a guy coming in that's going to pressure DJ Uiagalelei. So either way, if you've got a culture of competition, which I think they do, this should greatly benefit Clemson. This spring period should greatly benefit Clemson. That's not the only question they have, far from it, but it is the main question. What about Florida? Billy Napier is new, so he's in Gainesville. And there's a lot of uncertainty around the quarterback situation. So to refresh your memory, because you may remember something that didn't happen. If you don't follow Florida football on a day-to-day basis, you may remember Emory Jones as having transferred, but he didn't. He entered the transfer portal, but he never went anywhere. So he's still at Florida. I saw a lot of you surprised by that today when I said that. So Emory Jones is still there. Emory Jones is going to go through spring practice with Florida. Anthony Richardson is the preemptive favorite to end up being the starter here. And I do agree with that sentiment, but the problem here is, due to, I think, a procedure he had on his meniscus, he is probably not going to be full go in the spring. Jack Miller, who was in that three-way dance at Ohio State last year and didn't end up winning the job, he has transferred in. So those are some names. But what do we actually think here? Because I get the sense that most Florida fans, even if Anthony Richardson's not full go in spring, they believe he possesses by far the best collection of skill and probably is going to be able to be the most functional in Billy Napier's offense. That's the ultimate guy that's going to win the job. I agree with that, but I'm very interested to see not just who wins the job. I'm interested to see what happens if at the end of Florida's spring practice it becomes kind of evident that that's the case. Part one's who's going to be the starter. Part two is, does it become obvious? And if it is obvious, well, then you got to look at what happens to the guys who aren't going to fill that starting blank, and do they hit the transfer portal? Because, Emory Jones has already been there once, so that's something to watch with all these programs, Florida among them. Let's go all the way out west. Let's go to Oregon. And this is another situation where if you tuned out for a little while, let's say you're a Colorado fan, for example, and you guys weren't in Pac-12 championship contention, you weren't in playoff contention, so you just decided, you know what, I'm going to go enjoy Christmas. I'm going to tune out. Playoff is what it is. Bowl season is what it is. I need a break from this. I'm tired of it. Well, what if I told you, as you come back to the table, Bo Nix, that Auburn kid, Bo Nix, he's not an Auburn kid anymore. He's at Oregon. You guys are probably going to face him. And Ty Thompson's there too. The question a year ago was, is this Ty Thompson kid, this true freshman, crown jewel, at least one of them, of Oregon's previous recruiting class, is he going to come in and end up winning the starting job? He did not end up winning the starting job. Well, now he's got a year under his belt. And yet there is perceived to be a very real battle here. In fact, most people, I've seen at least, lean Bo Nix as the default starter, just because of experience, I guess, and the unproven nature of Ty Thompson. But listen, there's a reason why Bo Nix is there. It's because his results have been sketchy at times, at best, at Auburn. Now, the counter to that is, what kind of system was he ever in that put him in a good position to develop? And I would say, well, he wasn't in one, but then I would follow that up, and this is just me arguing with myself at this point, enjoy it, is, well, he chose to go there. So all's well that ends poorly for Bo Nix at Auburn. Is he walking into a situation that's more conducive to developing him? Or is this a guy who was always being held down by the system he played in, and he's just ready to explode at Oregon? It's not my lean, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. But look, bigger picture here is, if Ty Thompson doesn't make a big leap, I don't care who he's competing against, if he doesn't make a big leap this year, it's fair to start to just wonder, is that the player that we thought he was? Did we get what we thought we got with Ty Thompson? I don't think that's unreasonable to start talking about in a guy's second year on campus. That's why God invented spring. So I don't want to put cart ahead of the horse here. We got to see how things play out in spring. At North Carolina, this one's going to be a little more quiet, because there are not high-profile names involved here, unless you follow recruiting. If you follow recruiting, not this last cycle, but cycle before last, you remember the name Drake May. Drake May was a guy who was committed to, it was last class. So he was committed to Alabama and then decommitted, and this wasn't one of those situations where Alabama told him, we're not going to have room for you. This was a legitimate North Carolina taking him from Alabama situation, and he was there last year. And he's the guy who's been groomed. He's the guy all North Carolina fans, and for that matter, that coaching staff, they have looked at and they said, when Sam Howell's out of here, we know he's going to be a three-and-done guy. When he goes off to the NFL, we're going to have Drake May here with 1 year under his belt to learn. And we may get him a little bit of mop-up duty, which they did at times last year, not much. And he's going to be the guy who takes over. Okay, well, you may ask, why am I talking about him then? Because isn't this a quarterback competition segment? Yeah. Well, you got a kid by the name of Jacoby Criswell up there who is apparently not on board with the concept of just white flagging it and giving this job to Drake May. And Mac Brown has spoken about the two. I think their staff believes they've got two guys they can realistically win with. I don't think the staff has looked around and said quarterback's going to be the thing that holds us down this year. Now, they're not going to have a proven commodity there, but I think they feel like they got one or maybe two guys they can win with. Thing about it, though, is even though I and most people lean Drake May, it's not something that's decided right now. And for a guy who's never taken a job by the throat before, you still want to see it. If for nothing other than validation's purposes in your own mind, you still want to see it. Auburn is hazy, very hazy. There are a lot of names here again. Let's see, depth and names and quality production, these aren't all coinciding all the time. So at Auburn, Bo Nix is out. So you got TJ Finley, the former LSU transfer. You got Zach Calzada, recent Texas A&M transfer. Robbie Ashford is there. Some of you may not even be aware of that. Recent Oregon transfer. Demetrius Davis is there. He's the only one who hadn't transferred. But he would, I think, by most accounts be listed third or fourth. I happen to like his skill set, but I can't get a lot of folks echoing that sentiment around the program to the point where they think he's going to be a realistic candidate to start there. I have no clue, nor does anyone else around that program, who's going to be the starter here. Zach Calzada, you saw him beat Alabama. Okay, that's by far the biggest feather in his cap and the biggest bullet point on his resume. I think he played hurt most of the year last year. He's not the first guy to ever have to do that. I think he was probably a little more banged up than they let you know at Texas A&M. He's a guy, again, tools is something that's very familiar to be said about every quarterback at this level. He's got them. So does TJ Finley, and you've seen him. He's more of a known commodity around Auburn. I really don't know what they expect Robbie Ashford to bring to the table other than depth. But again, when you don't have a clearly defined pecking order, and you've also got a lot of turnover on your coaching staff, keep that in mind too. Mike Bobo, offensive coordinator, out the door. Anything can happen in spring. When you got a shakeup and you got a fresh situation on the depth chart and then also the coaching depth chart, anything can happen. Watch Auburn closely. Because, I mean, that's one of many issues to watch around Auburn football, but keep an eye on that one. Now, at Texas A&M, maybe unlike Auburn, A&M's a program that if I were to tell you, hey, I'll give you a guarantee here, A&M's really going to hit a home run at quarterback this year. They're going to really get it figured out. You would think to yourself, okay, well, if Texas A&M with that roster is going to have good quarterback play, that means they're going to be a playoff contender, right? Yeah, they probably would be. So this is a very important quarterback battle to watch as a result of that. Haynes King, remember that name? Started last year, got hurt, out for the year. Well, he's still there. Connor Wigman's the kid they just brought in. True freshman. Jimbo, famously at this point on our show, called him the best quarterback in the country, even more so than Quinn Ewers because he was counting transfer portal guys. But also, for that crowd who's been tuned out and just is now coming back to the table, former LSU quarterback Max Johnson is in College Station. A lot of folks are leaning Max Johnson to win this job. This is an area where I'm not going to say I disagree because I don't have a fully formed opinion yet. Here is my opinion. I don't think this is Max Johnson's job right now at all. I've seen Haynes King play for Texas A&M, so is Jimbo. I think he's a very, very good quarterback when he's fully healthy. I have to expect that he will be at some point this year. And if that's the case, if Max Johnson wins this job, I don't think it's happening now, and I don't think it's happening at the end of spring. If it happens, it's going to be one of those situations where 2 weeks before whoever they open against this fall, Jimbo says on a Monday morning or afternoon, I'd like to make an announcement. Max Johnson's our starting quarterback. You hear those words? Probably going to be in mid-August, okay, not mid-March or early April. But that's what makes this really fun to watch because, again, this is not the difference between Texas A&M trying to become bowl eligible. You're talking about the difference between floating in that 9-win range and trying to push Alabama and trying to, even if they don't win the West, trying to be in a position where, regardless, we're in the playoff picture. That quarterback situation, that's going to determine that, obviously, for Texas A&M. One more I wanted to mention here before we move on, Michigan. And then I just want you to think. And if you're watching on YouTube, you already see the two names. If you're listening on podcast, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, let's see. And you remember one name. You remember Cade McNamara. Or maybe you remember J.J. McCarthy. But I don't think a lot of people remember the same two who went at it last year are kind of back again this year. So it's not a situation where some true freshman has walked in or some big transfers come in the door. No. Still really primarily the same two. I'm not saying there are two guys in this room, but it's the same two guys we were talking about last year. And remember the style of play that Michigan chose to employ early on. And it was Cade McNamara at the helm at quarterback. And they played a very, very ball control type offense. The week they finally opened it up, ironically they lost. It was to Michigan State. We were at that game. But Cade McNamara carried the mail a bulk of the way, and you saw glimpses of J.J. McCarthy. Now, there is a couple of schools of thought. One school of thought is Harbaugh's back. He's going to go with his proven commodity. There's no reason to change things. He is very risk-averse. The other school of thought is a lot of folks just thought this from the second J.J. McCarthy got on campus. It's going to take a year for him. By year two, his talent will overcome whatever the depth situation is. He'll be the starter. Hey, again, that's what we got spring practice for. Because I am one of those who has expected a move to be made by J.J. McCarthy, but that's always in the future tense. At least it has been so far. So quarterback battles all over the place. Look, a lot of you, hit the microphone. A lot of you wanted me to mention Penn State. I'm not looking at that way. Drew Aller, for the record, and the reason people are asking about it, is a 5-star true freshman quarterback who's come in there. And as one of you so eloquently put it, it's the true freshman in Drew Aller against the 35-year-old veteran in Sean Clifford. I think it's Clifford's job. I think Drew Aller's got a very, very bright future ahead of him. But my feel on that, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong, my feel on it is it's going to be kind of a Ty Thompson situation at Oregon last year. Ty Thompson walked in, but the feedback you got is still pretty raw by college football standards, by major college football standards. We got to do some work on him. So he's not a guy who's a candidate to just come in and take the job as a true freshman. That's how I feel the Penn State quarterback situation is going to play out. And who knows? Maybe you reassess midpoint of the season, later in the season. But I don't view this as one of the 10 highest profile and most intriguing quarterback battles right now. Again, we'll see. That's also what spring's for. Could be proven wrong there.